I'm Lloyd Shirley, and I want to bring to you today some thoughts from Jeremiah 29:11. Jeremiah says, I know the thoughts that I think towards you, thoughts of peace and not evil, to give you a future and a hope. You see, the Jewish people in chapter 29 of Jeremiah were in the beginning of the Babylonian captivity. The years were 606 to 588 BC. God is judging the nation of Judah because of their unfaithfulness. The Babylonians have attacked Jerusalem. They've taken prisoners back to Babylon, including the king, the court officials, and even the craftsmen. The Jews are saying, this isn't supposed to happen to us. We're the chosen people of God. We're the apple of God's eye. What is going on? Well, when the Babylonians invaded the land of Judah, the captives are probably thinking, this can't happen, this can't last long. God is going to come through for us again. He always does. In fact, the prophet Hananiah even said in Jeremiah 28 that it would be 2 years and God will break the yoke of the king of Babylon and we will be free. We're coming back home, praise God. But it wasn't a true prophecy. For in Jeremiah 29, 1 through 6, Jeremiah writes a letter to the captives in Babylon, and here's what he says. You're not coming home for a while. Work and build houses and settle down. Work and plant gardens and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters. Be fruitful and multiply. In other words, you're not ready to go home because I have plans for you right here in Babylon. Could God actually have a reason for us to be here on earth awaiting his soon return? Well, in verse 7, Jeremiah says, seek peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. And the Jews are thinking, you want us to pray for a community that has carried us into captivity? Jeremiah, have you lost your mind? These people are enemies of God. They are people who've ransacked the city of Jerusalem. So how can you ask us to pray for these people? Well, let's go further into the word, down to verse 10. And God says something else that would have gotten the Jews all riled up. He says, when 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my gracious promise to bring you back to this place. The Jews had to be thinking, you mean we've got to live in this rotten country for the next 70 years? Most of us are going to be dead by then. What kind of plan is that, God? But if you look at the Old Testament, you will see that God accomplished great things in the lives of his people during those 70 years. Number one, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were 3 of the captivities that were taken into Babylon. They went on to become 3 of the best administrators that the country ever had. Number 2, Daniel was another one of those who was taken captive. And he, while in Babylon, interpreted a dream for the king of Nebuchadnezzar. As a result of that, he was made ruler over the entire province of Babylon. Number 3, with Daniel's help, Nebuchadnezzar becomes a believer in God. We find that in Daniel 4:37, he says, I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven because everything he does is right and all his ways are just. And those who walk in pride, he is able to humble. Well, this beautiful moment in the king's life probably would not have happened if it weren't for the presence of the Jewish people in the land of Babylon. Let's look at number 4. Because the Jewish people were able to live in peace under the leadership of Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar, they were inspired and had time to write some of the greatest books of the Old Testament that we enjoy today. 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, and Psalm 137. These were all written during the 70-year period. And then number 5, perhaps the most important of all, during this 70-year period, the Jewish people were beginning to realize that they needed to get right with God. They were beginning to see that they needed to apologize for the mistakes they had made in the past. In Jeremiah 4:18, he says, "Your own conduct and actions have brought this upon you." Well, how many of us during our childhood heard, "Your own conduct and actions have brought this upon you"? I heard it many times as a child while growing up, but there are times when we need to hear it. And this time the Jewish people needed to hear it because for those years they had been under the impression that because they were the chosen people of God, they could do whatever they wished and God would protect them. They were the guardians of the temple. They were the ones that were keeping the things going in the country of Jerusalem. They can live their lives any way they please. But God said in Jeremiah 7:4, "Do not trust in deceptive words. If you reform your ways and change your actions, I will let you stay in the land." But they didn't listen. God is using those 70 years of exile to show the Jewish people where they were wrong, what they needed to do to make things right. So when you look at the big picture, you can see that God is working behind the scenes in the hearts and in the lives of the Jewish people. Even though they can't see it, God's plan isn't always what it was thought to be. God's plan is always best. Even if we don't understand it all at the time, even if we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, even if we would never have chosen the path that we're taking for ourselves, that brings us to Jeremiah 29:11. "For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord." And then Jeremiah says, God has plans to prosper you and not to harm you. When I talk about God prospering us, I'm not talking about everybody in the church winning the Powerball jackpot. I'm talking about the everyday blessings of God that are mentioned in verses 4-6. The blessings of a place to live, food to eat, a job to work or hope of being employed, families to love, communities to pray for. If God could make Daniel 10 times wiser than all the astrologers and the magicians, what could he do for you at your place of employment? All these things are a sign that we're experiencing God's plan to prosper us and not to harm us, even though we don't understand it during that time. I want to introduce a short video for you, and I think you'll enjoy the words that are going to come for you now.
Sunday. It's a holy day. It's a righteous day. It's a day set aside for God. But what about Monday? Does Monday matter to God? What do you think about when I say the word work? Maybe it's an obligation, a necessity, something to endure. Perhaps it's an obsession, a vehicle for power, wealth, and status. But maybe, just maybe, it's something else. It's a chance to serve and to find satisfaction, purpose, and destiny. From shop assistant to CEO, I've discovered something quite profound. Work is God's idea. When God created, He worked for 6 days before He rested. When He created Adam, He put him in the garden to work, and that was before the fall and before sin. His word exhorts us to work heartily, to work with excellence, and to do all things for the glory of God. The psalmist said that every day ordained for us was written in your book before one of them came to be. God has a plan and a purpose for your Monday. There is no separation between what is secular and what is sacred, between Sunday and Monday. God is vitally interested and intimately interested in every aspect of our life in every day. Whether you're a priest or a plumber, your work is sacred. You are anointed and appointed and placed in your specific workplace for a reason. Yes, Sunday is important, but Monday matters to God.
So having viewed the video, what is God's plan for your everyday life? Work, get to work promptly, be a witness while you're at the job, have great work ethics, follow the leadership of your supervisor, give an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. Well, Jeremiah says that God has plans to give you a hope and a future. For the Jewish people, that meant going back to the promised land. But for us, you and me, it means going up to the promised land. If you're a believer in Jesus Christ, you have a hope and a future that goes beyond the perimeters of this life. You have a hope and a future that you will be in eternity with God Himself. You have the hope that has begun a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Jesus Christ. You have a hope that God will someday be finished with your work here that you're doing in this life, and you will hear Him say, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant," and that will be the beginning of our reign with Christ forever and ever. You have a certain hope that God promises in life for you to come.